Hello and welcome to SquadCon. Today we'll be meeting with Helen. If you want to give us a quick introduction, that would be great.
Certainly. Thanks, Aleise, and thank you for the opportunity to speak at this. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Helen Rabe. I am based over in the UK and I am the CISO for the BBC. And what that means, very succinctly put, is I am responsible for managing the cybersecurity operations and information security operations for the BBC.
All right, and thank you again for being willing to be on our panel. So my first question, so you've spoken about breaking barriers on your journey into the C-suite. So can you tell us what were some of the pivotal moments that convinced you information security would be like a lifelong path, and how did you navigate early gatekeeping and doubters?
So I'm going to break it down into two parts. The first bit is, I'm mature, right? So I've been doing this a while. And when I started out in my career, I was a IT networks project manager, program manager. So I had always touched on information security in the 90s and the noughties in its traditional sort of really raw perimeter, old school firewall type security. And I'd always loved it, but breaking into it was very difficult because I didn't have the entry barriers were harsh, right? If you weren't a deep techie, you didn't get a shoe in the door. You couldn't get in. Um, but then, what I did was basically take an opportunity that was presented to me and make it my own, and I'll talk to that just now. But the defining moment for me was 2007, and it was when I had my first smartphone. I got my first Apple smartphone, and I was going through the settings. I was looking at this little device that had more processing power than the space shuttle. And I was stunned, but I was also then stunned by the security attributes within the settings. And they were basic back in 2007, right? It was just a first gen Apple phone.
Right.
Um, and I looked at that and I thought, so we're basically putting security in the hands of every person, every consumer. If the trend of this is just going to be that this becomes something that we have as our day-to-day lifestyle attribute, in other words, this phone is going to be a part of our everyday lives, and that's the way it was going, then security will obviously become, to me, it was obvious at the time, become a lifestyle choice. That meant everybody, whether you were in the industry or not, would have to have a measure of security knowledge. And I figured, well, that will keep me gainfully employed for a long time if I can break into it. The other thing is then over time, suddenly Facebook popped up. And in truth, I'm not a fan of social media. I do not do it. The most exciting I have is I lurk on LinkedIn. But I saw Facebook and I thought, wow, this is not going to end well. Okay. And that's the introvert in me speaking. But I also then realized that the data, the usage of data, the way we were behaving with data, we were sharing with so much impunity. And I just did not know where it was going to go. And I figured, again, at some point, people are going to start caring about where this information is going and how it's being used. I couldn't conceive back in 2007 how data would be commoditized or how our digital identities would become such a commodity. But I certainly knew that there would be a requirement for it to be secure. That was an epiphany moment for me. That's when I really realized I want in. I want into this industry and I'm going to do what I can. The detractors, the doubters, you will always get them. It doesn't matter how far in your career you are, you will always have them. And I had a lot of them. And they really were pretty, successful at keeping me out. But what I did was take a different tact. So I resigned from my job and I started focusing on contracting into organizations, particularly financial services companies, because I'd done this in my previous role briefly, but successfully. I started focusing on going into companies that had been compromised, financial services companies, because back in 2011, 2012, no one wanted you to know they had been compromised, particularly financial services. So I started in behind the scenes. I'd go in and I'd do remediation programs. And that's where I started building up my knowledge, building up my network, building those relationships. And purely by chance, I got a contract with the company. And when I was finished up, I drew up a conclusion report, handed it to the managing director, who then said to me, "You've recommended we need a head of information security. Can you do this for us?" And I went, "Yes." So you will have detractors, you will have doubters, but your career is yours to make, and you will find the opportunities when they present themselves. Take them. Do not second guess yourself. Trust me when I tell you, you can do this. Just believe in yourself. So that's how it
That's
started.
That's great, and I love that your career is yours to make. That's great advice. And I also thought I was the only person that didn't do social media. So,
No, I think there are more and more.
look, our group is it's growing. So, my next thing in 2025, the CISO remit often spans data privacy, resilience, and even business continuity. And so, what duties have expanded the most at the BBC, and where do you still draw like a hard boundary?
So you're right. So look, we can learn. We learn our CISMs, our CRISCs, our CISPs. We get all the certifications and we've got the alphabet soup behind our name. And that's great, right? Those are the principles of how we do security. And we need that knowledge. When you come to execute that knowledge in real life, it is a whole different playing field. It is a whole different ballgame. And that knowledge is great. But every organization has its own culture, its own maturity, and its own operating model and capabilities. And you have to figure out how you're going to deliver those principles strategically and operationally. And if you want to take the stance that, well, I'm sorry, but privacy does not belong to security and it doesn't belong to me, that comes with a downside, right? Depending on the maturity of your organization. So I'll give you an example. And when I was the CISO for CBRE, it was a great company, phenomenal, building its maturity and security. But in 2017, 2018, GDPR was in its infancy. It was nascent. Nobody knew how to deliver it. It was a regulation and everybody was going mad. And everybody was leveraging security to implement these programs because at the time, no data privacy teams existed. It was not a mature capability. And often the language used is very security centric, which means that its home naturally gravitates towards security teams doing things that do not technically belong with them or operationally for that matter. You'll be called on to do that sometimes. You will need to flex. If you push back and go, doesn't belong to me, sorry, it's not a security thing, careful how that's perceived. You could be perceived as that being a thorn in the side. Sometimes you will be called on to do things much like the GDPR program. Maybe just embrace it and go, okay, you give me the budget, you give me the headcount, and you do need to make those asks. And I will stretch my skill set and my teams and we'll look at what we can deliver here. And be realistic, right? Don't take on something that is so way outside the security remit that you will be setting yourself up for failure. But GDPR is a prime example of how this worked. So security delivered the GDPR program, and as it matured, we handed it over into the data privacy team. As that team became onboarded, as that function matured, we slowly transitioned GDPR, data privacy, etc., into DPO functions. Now a DPO function is a standard in most companies, and that's great. But it's one example of how, there will be times you'll be called on to do things that don't sit in your remit. That's just an example. In the BBC, I am very, very fortunate. The BBC is a machine. It is a vast machine. And it's a mature machine, right? Which means as a CISO, I have some serious luxury. I have a data privacy team, which I am very strongly aligned with. We are symbiotic. We mesh well. We collaborate well. We have strong partnerships. Build those partnerships. Look after each other. Create that symbiotic relationship. It doesn't mean you have to take on accountability. It just means you share and you collaborate. That's great. If you're pulled on to do something that sits outside of your remit, consider it. Consider it an opportunity. At the moment, I'm looking in the BBC at disinformation. For some reason, it's like GDPR. It's a nascent. Where does this belong? Who's going to own it? What are we going to do? How are we going to do it? It's something we're investigating, and the security team is very actively involved in what that might look like when we mature the function and the capability within the BBC. It's not a natural thing, I don't believe, for security teams, but we're looking at it. And my hard line is business continuity. I am very clear on this. Happy on the respond and recover. We've got the NEST framework. We know what our accountabilities are, but there has to be a hard demarcation. There's a hard boundary line on business continuity for me. And I mean that when it comes to service continuity, service restoration, right? All that resilience planning, all those restoration plans, all that stuff needs to be done by business continuity, not security teams. We do not have the capacity in security to take on a business-wide business continuity remit. It's just, yes, it's a ransomware attack, but I'm part of a core business continuity plan which I support. But to own service restoration for critical systems, no. That's my hard line. That's where I go, yeah, no, I'm not doing that. As much as I can be a thorn in the side, perception, happy to take the hard line on that one, because that really is a lot of, investment, a lot of practice, a lot of muscle memory in an organization needs to sit there, and it needs to be done persistently across the business, and security, I do not believe personally should own that.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Thank you. What single KPI do you brief to the board that best captures BBC's cyber risk posture, and why do you pick that one?
That's a great question. I'll tell you one that matters a lot to the board, the Audit Risk Committee, and by extension the board, is how much residual risk, how much residual cyber risk are we carrying at the BBC? And that's important because there is a lot of noise at the BBC. It's a vast organization, huge attack surface, a lot of legacy debt, a lot of legacy risk. So when we talk about residual risk, it's clear to the board that they understand how much we're carrying, what are we carrying, how are we maintaining this risk, and how are we mitigating. And by the way, which of this residual risk can we never close down, right? So it's setting expectations that they understand how much we carry at any given time. We have targets. It's taken 2 years of strong maintenance, really strong relationship management with the risk owners to get them to understand the risks that they're accepting. To change behaviors, because that's another thing. The board saw that at one point, residual risk was being used a little too fast and loose, and they wanted that behavior to change. So we put in place, workflow management to bring that down so people could take accountability, understood the accountability of the risk that they were signing off and how it worked. In other words, you don't sign off a risk and it now suddenly belongs to security. It doesn't belong to us. It still belongs to you. And by the way, you're being held accountable for that risk because we monitor, we manage that risk, and we check in with you and make sure within 6 months, where's the plan that you committed to? How far along this plan are you? Etc. And that gets reported to the Audit Risk Committee. And if it's particularly problematic, it will go to the board eventually for visibility. So residual risk is certainly the one that I would say is the most focused on for us.
Okay. All right. That's great. And so the BBC issued guidance limiting Gen AI for factual reporting. And so what guardrails or watermarking technology are you all piloting to verify AI-assisted content before it hits the air?
Well, I'm not going to give away secrets and tell you what specifically we're using because I'm not allowed to do that. But we have a brilliant research and development function in the BBC. They're just brilliant minds. Watermarking technology is not a new technology, right? It's been used for a while on video content creation and the like, but it's certainly coming to prominence now because of AI-generated content and misinformation. So what we're doing in the BBC, and the R&D team is doing this. When I say we, security is not doing it, but the R&D team is looking at how we enhance existing technologies, how we build that out for this new era of AI-generated content, how we bring that at scale, because I certainly can say that at the BBC, we're a brand built on trust and integrity. We absolutely are looking at how we enhance those technologies to support our content distribution, our content outputs. So I can't, as I say, go into specificity, but I can tell you that as a technology, it's one that we're looking at enhancing, refining, and working with in our content distribution and bringing that forward. We are absolutely clear. Our integrity on our outputs matters. So this is a big area for R&D.
Okay, great. I want to take a little bit of a pivot and kind of,
Sure.
ask what programs have worked for the BBC to attract non-traditional talent, journalists, producers, neurodivergent thinkers into cyber roles.
Oh, so remember how earlier I said I belong to part of a big machine? The BBC's DEI is brilliant. Program is just phenomenal. So not only are they actively encouraging through recruitment processes how we focus on this, but we also have in-house development for all those that you consider the non-traditional, the neurodivergence, the equity and inclusion. I will say from a security standpoint, we have a phenomenal security champions network, right? That stretches across the BBC, and it's run by my team. Very, very active. And we have a great success story where recently, we did that in front of the BBC Philharmonic Orchestra. And one of the individuals in the orchestra reached out to thank me personally for having such a brilliant team, because that's not an area, even though these are BBC employees who use laptops and what have you, and are part of our core enterprise employee staff. These are not individuals who would ever, other than the mandatory security training, get the opportunity to meet a security team. But the Security Champions Network makes sure that it spreads across the BBC, across all those functions and capabilities, and it gets into the BBC and its people. Meeting and doing a Security Champions presentation for the orchestra meant that there was an individual there who suddenly realized that they actually really were fascinated by this. Thanked me for that, which I passed on to the team because it's their good work, but then said, any ideas on how I could get into this? So that then translates into another thing we have, which is called the 80/20 program. And it's not just a security thing, this is done in the BBC. The 80/20 program is you nominate, I think it's once or twice a year, individuals who'd be interested in coming over to maybe they will spend 20% of their working time over the next 6 months in your area. So that could be somebody who's from the BBC Orchestra who will spend 20% of their time over the next 6 months. And then what you do is you build a portfolio of work for them so they can go in and sit in governance and see what governance is about. What are the roles in governance? What do you do in governance? How does it operate? Maybe go and sit in forensics, go and sit in security, in the SOC. This individual will spend of that 20% flitting across the cybersecurity function within the BBC to see which area fits with them best, right? And then what we can do is if they are really interested, then the academy, which is the BBC's Learning Academy, will start to help them with regards to training. What courses can they do to start building up their skill sets, their knowledge base, etc. There are a myriad of opportunities for people here to take the initiative and build their skill sets within the BBC. And whether it's security or elsewhere, it's irrelevant. But certainly for us, our Security Champions Network gives us the coverage we need across the BBC, and it has worked brilliantly for us.
The BBC sounds like a well-oiled machine.
It can be. It's not perfect, but it has wonderful internal support structures, right? So as as the CISO, I know I can lean into that support machine, and I have these opportunities. I'm very, very fortunate, and I'm conscious. I know because not many organizations do have that opportunity, but I do, and I make good use of it, as does my team.
Oh, great. That's great. So, last question. If you could brief tomorrow's CISO on one underhyped risk coming for media organizations, what would it be?
I'm going to say focus on your media supply chain and operational technologies within the supply chain. It's the broadcasting sector is strange in this regard, but specifically this OT in the broadcast, so playout distribution systems. These are systems that require real-time availability. They're just critical to the business, and no one wants you to touch them, right? Taking those things down for patching and things like that. No, there's a no touchy policy. You just can't get near it. So I would say it's certainly a risk area that if I'm going to say to other broadcast sectors, CISOs to keep it open, whether I focus on that area, I think it's an area we haven't, well, I personally have not had the opportunity to pay as much attention to as I'd like to. Going forward, that will change, I can assure you. But certainly securing OT in the broadcast, the media supply chain, and the playouts and the content distribution.
Okay.
Get a plan
All
and
right.
mature it. Talk to your business. Because another thing is a lot of those systems are legacy systems. They're so old, they're no longer in support. Can't patch them. But it's a highly territorial area in broadcasting. Getting near it, people are very, very, and understandably, fiercely protective
Right.
about it. So there you go. Great question. Just a really challenging one to answer.
Look, great answer. So, any last minute comment, feedback, anything you'd like to give our viewers?
No, thank you very much for the opportunity just to have this quick, brief conversation. I met some of your members when they were over in London, had a great time with them. Brilliant women, right? Really. So I would say to just everybody watching this that take care of yourselves. Remember, your career is your own to manage. Don't worry about detractors. People will always have opinions, and you've really got to learn whose opinions matter and why it matters to you. Because believe me, the older you get, the more you'll realize that fewer and fewer of those opinions actually do have value. So make it your own. Don't underestimate yourself. Okay, and good luck, all of you. This is a great industry. I think that, the next generation, I look forward to seeing all of you coming up through the ranks and being the next CISOs.